Hey everybody, and welcome to this special Point North live commentary track for the 1987 classic, The Princess Bride. We're doing this on YouTube, which I've got to tell you feels very, very strange. There was a time when I seemed to spend half my life on YouTube, and now I haven't touched it in, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months, something like that, because we've migrated all the live broadcasts over to Crowdcast. But we are kicking the tires here. We are testing how everything is working just to see how well this is working. And the answer is apparently not terribly well, since the live stream just started behind my video here. A little delayed. It's all fine. It's all fine. It's all going to work out. Hopefully, it will be better than it was the last time that we used it, and we may even be able to migrate back here full time. We're going to see. We are testing the low latency chat tonight, and we are also testing the preservation of the chat after the fact. So, hey, let's just see how it all works out, shall we? It is a pleasure to have you all here. I see Jonathan and Tom and Becca and Angela, and I know that Melissa is here, and Marshall is here, and Megan is here, and Tom is here, and Nikki is here. It's wonderful to have you all here with me on this very special evening. It is, of course, May the 4th. It is, of course, Star Wars Day, and I have been teasing all week that there would be a very special surprise. As many of you have correctly guessed, it was supposed to be the Last Jedi podcast. The Last Jedi podcast is not going to make it today because of an unexpected sick kid situation this afternoon. So it will come out tomorrow or Sunday. I guarantee that by the time we sit down to record this week on Point North on Monday morning, for which you can join me at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central Time over on the Point North Media Crowdcast channel, you will have already the new episode of Story in Star Wars, along with the schedule for the next 6 weeks of Story in Star Wars. Someone, I believe it was Tom, was mentioning the long-awaited and long-promised second Rogue One lecture, and that is coming. I have put a pin in that. I moved it around in the order. I was originally going to do the second Rogue One lecture to catch up before we did The Last Jedi, but the more that I think about Rogue One, in the context of The Last Jedi in particular, and the more I think about The Last Jedi in the context of Rogue One, the more I think that I'm going to shuffle it back a little bit, because it is becoming increasingly clear to me that Rogue One is a definitive text within the frame of modern Star Wars, that it is a very quietly important piece of fiction. And I want to talk about that after we've talked about The Last Jedi, after we've talked about the shape of the Star Wars story now post The Last Jedi and looking ahead to Episode 9. There's just a lot to cover there. 6 weeks, says Angela. Yes, basically we're doing a compressed second season. Those 6 weeks, 6 shows, I think, that are probably going to be released over 12 weeks. I think we're going to go bi-weekly for the next little bit because there's just so much to talk about. And that will, of course, include, oh no, wait, 7? Yeah, 7. Sorry, 7, because we're also going to be doing the solo movie discussion as well. Maybe even a solo movie commentary when that comes out on DVD too. But certainly a Rogue One live commentary, certainly a Last Jedi live commentary. I think that would be amazing. And we had such fun doing the live commentary for The Force Awakens. I think it'd be a really good opportunity to talk about some Star Wars. So I'm very sorry that my promised gift. This is why I should never promise things, you guys, because my life is just too unreliable to promise things with any kind of great regularity. But yes, happy Star Wars Day, everyone. Please be satisfied that the glut of Star Wars content will fulfill you today, and then you'll have a very quiet, very lovely story in Star Wars within the next 48 hours or so. All right, let's get into our discussion of the 1987 classic, The Princess Bride. I am queued up to The Princess Bride title card, this brilliant beginning where we have the MGM logo, we have the Act 3 Productions logo, then we move into the Princess Bride logo, all with that sound, our first sound cue in this entire movie. If you discount the roaring lion of the MGM logo, I suppose, is Fred Savage coughing, which is just lovely, the grandson coughing. So I am all queued up. I'm going to count down from 3. When I say play, you hit play. We'll all watch this movie together. I will try and keep up with the chat, and we can all just have a lovely time here on this evening of Star Wars Day. 3, 2, 1, play. For those of you coming in a little late, I should say, as we get the coughing and the baseball game here, which I just adore. Ah, it's so good. Look at that. Look at that genuinely terrible baseball game. For those of you who are coming in a little late, of course, this is not the first time that I have discussed The Princess Bride. Back in the middle of March, I suppose, of this year, so almost 2 months ago now, I recorded 2 one-shot lectures over on pointnorthmedia.com discussing first the novel, William Goldman's original novel, William Goldman's original adaptation of the S. Morgenstern original novel, I suppose, if we're respecting the fictional frame. And I talked at length about the movie, talked for an hour about the movie. So this is going to be a little less formal and a little less analytical, but we are going to pay strong attention to the structure as we move through this book, because as we move through this movie, I should say, because the structure of this film is just fantastic. It's just fantastic. We're also, of course, going to talk about the primary theme of The Princess Bride, which is the telling of stories, the controlling of stories, the being controlled by stories. We're going to look at how narratives and narrativization intersect here in the context of The Princess Bride. So here we are, a minute and a half into the movie, the passing on of the book. I brought you a special present, he says, obviously echoing part of Bill Goldman's fictional frame that he gives us at the beginning of the novel version of The Princess Bride. I so adore Peter Falk in this role. It's just lovely. And as I said when we were talking about the movie in the context of the one shot, this is one of the most efficient introductory sequences that you are ever going to see. Keep an eye on the clock by the time we get to the actual breaking point of the story and we move into our inciting incident, because it is fast. It is real fast. I love that it's in Christmas paper, says Becca Eller. And Angela says the thing that I always think, hi, Columbo. Hi, Columbo. How you doing? It's a shame that he doesn't, conclude with one more thing. I adore Columbo, says Melissa. Yes. The mom who doesn't get a name, says Angela. Yes. Mom not appearing in this movie. Yeah, that's it. She's done. But she does a great deal because she foreshadows the coming of the grandfather character. She allows the foreshadowing of the coming of the grandfather character, which is enormously powerful. So here we got our transition into the story within the story. We break the frame now and move into the actual fictional construct. And you can hear the music coming up behind, the storybook Love by Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits, of course, which is just everywhere. I mean, I mentioned back in that lecture discussion, of course, that I bought several albums, compilations of TV and movie music back in the 1990s, and this was a constant. You would always get Storybook Love by Mark Knopfler. You would always get Angelo Badalamenti's score for Twin Peaks. Just fixtures in my life. I've internalized this music now. Yeah. We get Wesley chopping wood there. Gosh, the sexual chemistry, right? Not to kind of talk out of line here about a movie that was at least initially marketed as a kids movie, which is why it never really hit the commercial success that it deserved while it was in theaters. This movie was not a failure. It was made off of a budget of $16 million and took in $30 million in the box office. But of course, that tells you nothing about the enduring success and legacy of The Princess Bride. One of the things that is most complicated about this movie is that it is a kids film where within the first 5 minutes, we get some real sexual tension. This taking of the picture, this is incredible. This is so intimate and powerful, and that fresh air wafting through, gorgeously constructed. All of this movie was shot either on location in England or in Shepperton Studios, but even the set stuff, there it is. That's a look that you can build a relationship on, let me tell you. Even the soundstage shoots that we get in the course of this movie kind of feel appropriate within its own storybook frame. They are vignetted as they would be in a fairy tale, narratively vignetted. Then we break the frame or we break back to the frame, I suppose, because of course, this might be a kissing book, and no one wants to read a kissing book. Certainly, no one wants to have a kissing book read to them when they are sick. Yes. Yeah, Tom's saying I can't look at him in the first act without thinking of Robin Hood Men in Tights. I feel exactly the same way. Robin Hood Men in Tights was probably my favorite of the Mel Brooks parodies when I was a kid. I really, really loved that movie. I went through a phase of just devouring anything and everything in that mode and milieu, right? I remember going to the movie theater to watch Hot Shots Part 2. I don't remember what year that came out, so it may have been a re-release, but I definitely went to the movie theater to see Hot Shots Part 2, having devoured the first movie. I knew Hot Shots far better than I ever knew Top Gun. I probably still know Hot Shots better than I ever have known Top Gun. Marshall saying I preferred Spaceballs. I like Spaceballs a lot. I can't really put my finger on why I don't like Spaceballs as much as I like Robin Hood Men in Tights, but I think it is objectively a better film. Like, I think the writing is tighter, the satire is sharper, the parody is deeper and more affectionate in a really interesting way. But Spaceballs has never, connected for me. There is a weird tonal dissonance at the heart of Spaceballs too, where it momentarily, fleetingly throughout the course of its running time, forgets what it is. It forgets that it is a parody. But Wesley, most importantly, has been killed at sea. Killed by Pirates is good. And Buttercup will never love again. That's it, you guys. That is our entire prologue, in which we introduce 4 primary characters in 2 primary stories. We are 5.5 minutes into this movie. That is how fast it moves. It is incredibly deft. It is incredibly acute. There isn't a wasted moment, a wasted line of dialogue, a wasted landscape shot. The whole thing just sings. And when I think about Goldman as a screenwriter, that's what I look to. That enormous dexterity and elegance and, crucially, narrative efficiency. He can do more with less in the context of a screenplay than most screenwriters that I can think of. He's just extraordinary. Of course, he's most famous as an adapter of works, even in this instance, an adapter of his own work, right? William Goldman originally sold the rights to The Princess Bride to Fox right after the movie was published in 1973. They struggled for a long time trying to get that movie made. And finally, frustrated, Goldman bought the rights back and then tried himself to get it made and couldn't make it happen. So Rob Reiner eventually came, I think, in 1985 to Paramount asking for the very modest budget to make what is, from some perspectives, a kind of relatively high budget fantasy movie, right? It's got the tropes, it's got the trappings, it's got the sense. It doesn't have the right emotional tone of a classic high fantasy fairy tale adventure, but it's got the look, and that's crucially important. Yeah. Angela says getting killed by pirates is good. On to Black Sails. Yes, yes. Good. Oh yes, Becca commenting that she likes the Wesley dying voiceover. Yeah, yeah. Unlike other Robin Hood, says Angela Lurie, I speak with an English accent. Yeah, I like that movie a lot. I don't know what to do. Yeah. How old do we think the grandson is? Like 12, asks Melissa. I believe that the grandson is canonically 10 years old, at least was in the script. I'm not entirely sure how old Fred Savage was, and this can't turn into me Googling things, so that's the rest of the evening. But yeah, yeah. Oh, Matt pointing out that she seems to have borrowed the tiara from the princess in the Never-Ending Story. Right, there was a look for fantasy movies in the 80s. They all look like this. There's several costumes in this movie that look very close to things that we've seen previously in Willow, things that we've seen in Labyrinth, in Never-Ending Story. Absolutely, yeah, yeah. Becca saying Humperdinck is such a dink, but he's rocking that outfit. Yes, no kidding. Nikki went to a private Christian school, and somehow our 6th grade teacher let us watch Spaceballs. That is impressive. Wow. That's, yeah, I remember watching The Princess Bride actually more than once in the back of a science class toward the end of term, I think, but yeah. The brilliant Wallace Shawn here playing Vizzini, and of course, Andre the Giant, Mandy Patinkin playing Inigo Montoya. This is a great cast. I think that Humperdinck is generally recognized as the weakest performance in the movie, but it's also the performance that has the least substance to it. He gets the least material to play with, the least material to work as he moves through this film. Though that is not to say that his performance is equal to the other performances. There are a couple beats here that I'm less fond of, I must admit. Yeah. I love this trio, says Angela. Great intro. It's fantastic, right? We're just, look how swiftly we're moving here. We're 9 minutes in now. We've already abducted Buttercup. We already have our inciting incident. I believe the inciting incident happened something like 7.5 minutes into the film. That's where we start. And let's talk a little about inciting incidents, and let's talk a little about protagonism here, because I talked about this a little in the breakdown of the movie that I did for the Point North one-shot, but I find this completely fascinating because protagonism is a nebulous thing within the frame of The Princess Bride. There are, I think, 3 primary arguments, maybe even 4 primary arguments for who is the protagonist of The Princess Bride. And the answer is that they are all kind of protagonists of separate stories. I'm thinking of the grandson. I am thinking no, the grandfather is the protagonist of that framing device. I've never thought of this before, but the grandfather is the protagonist of the framing device because he is the one with the goal and he is the one that is controlling the conflict. The grandson is the block. He's the impediment. He's the antagonist in that story. So the grandfather is the protagonist of the frame, I would argue. His goal simply to tell this story to his grandson. Then we get Wesley, obviously. We get Inigo, I think, is a powerful protagonist in his own significant subplot, but doesn't control the overarching shape of the story. It's Buttercup. Buttercup is actually the protagonist of this film. We start with her. We end with her. She is present for all of the turning scenes, the turning points in the course of this film. It's deceptive, but really quite beautifully constructed. Wesley, of course, can't be our primary protagonist because, well, he's dead through much of the first act and dead through much of the second act. He's absent from about half of this film when you add up its entire running time. But yeah, even though he is, of course, present here as we are looking back through eel-infested waters to see the local fishermen just going for a pleasure cruise. Yeah. Oh, no, Shane is bowing out because there's a thunderstorm. I'm so sorry, Shane, though. Not sorry that you're getting a thunderstorm tonight. I would love a thunderstorm tonight, yes. Good. These costumes are way more fun than I remember, says Becca Eller. That's interesting. Yeah, they're very theatrical is the thing, which I think is what makes that soundstage vignette shooting that we get for some of our action sequences actually work really well. It does feel theatrical. It feels oversized, yeah. Angela saying, I love that Buttercup is the protagonist, just like Evie is in The Mummy. You know what, Angela? That is a really great pull. That is a really great point of comparison there, because in both cases, you would expect the classic protagonistic figure, the hero, to be driving the action, to be guiding the action, to be defining the action. But he's not. He's just along for the ride or absent from much of the ride. Evie is absolutely driving the mummy. Yeah. Melissa saying, I beg to differ about Wesley. There are certain MCU movies where our lead is gone for large chunks. No, that's completely fair. It doesn't necessarily stand in Wesley's way that he's absent from the movie, though I think in this specific instance, it does. What it's really about is who controls the movement of the plot, because each of the dividing scenes that we get to delineate the first act from the second from the third, and the midpoint most powerfully of all, right slap bang in the middle of this movie, we're going to get that beat when Wesley and Buttercup emerge from the fire swamp, and Buttercup chooses to hand Wesley over to Humperdinck and Count Rogan. That choice is the only choice that is made in that scene. It's the only choice that matters, and that is the one that turns the trajectory of this film. Classic cutaway. She doesn't get eaten by the eels at this time. The way that we play with the fictional frame, this isn't just a gorgeously layered story, right? It's layered in the sense of the story within the frame, of course, because we get Buttercup's story and Inigo's story, and kind of to a lesser extent parts of Fezzik's story, and we certainly get Wesley's story. We get all of these layered stories, and then we get the frame bounding them. And the way that we cut from the frame to the central narrative and back again, we do it in multiple ways through the course of the film, but that hard cut is absolutely one of my favorites. And this, of course, this leaning on the fourth wall metatextual commentary on the nature of storytelling. No, you passed that, Grandad. You read it already. Very, very good. And then we kind of cut back. We try and kind of resurrect the momentum that we had here, which just brings us to that anticlimactic rescue by Andre the Giant. She was very close to the boat at that moment. Someone is very skillful at sailing this boat through eel-infested waters. Yeah. Here come the shrieking eels. Good. I'm explaining it because you look nervous, says Becca. Chef kiss. I completely agree. I completely agree. Yeah, Becca says, Buttercup tries to be a self-rescuing princess one time and she gets freaking eels. Well, okay, I'm not sure that's true. I think that Buttercup is a self-rescuing princess 4 times in the course of this film. I would count that as the first, certainly. I think the second is the "and you can die too for all I care," where she pushes Wesley down the bank and his identity is finally revealed, right? That's a pretty powerful self-rescuing princess moment right there. Then we get her standing up to Humperdinck, you know, commanding him to recover Wesley after he claims to have sent him back to his ship, of course. And then we get, as troubling as it might be, her attempted suicide right at the end of the movie. She is ultimately going to take the only out that she has from this terrible situation. She is not going to reconcile herself to a life with Humperdinck. She is going to take braver, and certainly, yes, of course, morally complicated action, but braver action in that moment. Wesley saves her there, but he only saves her by his presence, by his restoration, in a sense. So I guess you can argue that actually Miracle Max saves her at that point. But hey, we'll talk about Miracle Max later as we move forward. Yeah, yeah. Faraway shots of the cliffs of Dover, says Angela. They absolutely are. Yes. And we'll see. Yeah, look at that transition into the soundstage. It's real good is the thing. It does look theatrical. It sits uncomfortably alongside the landscape shots, the actual real landscape shots. But, you know, I think it generally speaks to the tone of the movie. The soundtrack is really lovely too. I love this ominous string arrangement that's sitting behind the action here. Speaking of stories and storytelling, you were supposed to be this Colossus, you were this great legendary thing, and yet he gains, as Vicini says, telling Fezzik the story of Fezzik in order to motivate him or in order to draw a clear delineation between the reality of the man and the myth of the man, right? The story here is faltering. It can be used as motivation, or it can be used as a complaint that the real world within the fictional frame doesn't quite match up to expectations there. Yeah. Andre was so broken down at this point. It's really sad, says Tom. Do you mean physically? Because God, he was a mess. The sequence that he has with Wesley, the Man in Black, in just a few minutes time is among my least favorite in the movie because it is so compromised, right? During the production of that sequence, he had ruined his back so badly that he couldn't carry carry Elvis around. So they have to shoot all of that close-up stuff where Wesley is holding around his neck. Wesley's just standing on a platform, which is why in that sequence we're fixated on these weird close-up shots. Whereas in the Wesley Inigo fight here that we're about to get at the top of the Cliffs of Insanity, we're shooting in 3/4 shots, we're shooting in full body shots, we're shooting in 2 shots. We're doing wonderful camera work because both Cary Elwes and Mandy Patinkin had studied for that sword fight. They had learned the choreography perfectly. They learned to fight both right and left-handed. There is 1 shot, 2 shots, I suppose, 1 shot of each actor that is a stunt double in that entire fight sequence, which is by contrast, my favorite part of this movie. Inconceivable. I have seen this movie 100 times, and every single time I have laughed at his delivery on that line. That is one of those lines that has absolutely entered pop culture, I think. I don't even necessarily think that at this point you need to know that you're referencing The Princess Bride in order to say, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. It's just lovely. Yeah. Yeah, Angela's saying they sword trained for 4 to 5 months for the scene, and then they practiced the actual fight choreography for 3 weeks intensively. And then when they were shooting the rest of the movie, which had a fairly brief shoot, but they still had downtime when they were shooting other things, Cary Elwes and Mandy Patinkin would just practice. They learned to fight right-handed and left-handed, and both actors learned both parts of the fight so that they could anticipate better what the other actor was doing, because they wanted to make it look real. And they're fighting with rapiers there, and they could have been harmed. They could have been injured. That I've said this before, I know, but there are weird moments in this movie that just live in my memory. There are weird choices in the performance. There are specific deliveries of lines that just are so resonant in my memory. And that little half swagger turn that Inigo gives as he's walking back to the top of the cliff is one of my favorite things. I absolutely love how that looks. Mandy Patinkin, of course, by this point, probably the most well-known and most critically regarded actor in the cast, I guess. Cary Elwes was coming off of a knockout performance in The Lady Grey opposite Helena Bonham Carter, but Mandy Patinkin was already a Tony Award-winning actor and a Golden Globe-nominated actor at this point. I forget, but he was already an award-winning and very well-esteemed actor at this point. I hate waiting. It's very good. Yeah, Inigo's little wave. He's so amiable, says Marshall Moore. Yes. This is also a great adaptation from the novel. This line where Inigo swears on the soul of his father, Domingo Montoya, you will reach the top alive, right? And Wesley's response is just throw me the rope. In the novel, we get a much longer piece of dialogue, which is just much less immediately effective. We get, I do not know this Domingo Montoya of whom you speak. And it's much more flowery and much more traditionally fantasy, I suppose, but we undercut the expectation there by having Wesley go from, well, that's very reassuring, but I'm afraid you'll just have to wait, to throw me the rope. He's right there. He can read the sincerity and the underlying morality, I think, of Inigo Montoya, though Inigo is he's kind of a classic fairy tale character in that he appears very much to be one thing, but everything in the movie tells us that he is in fact another. He is definitely a hired sword. He is definitely a mercenary, right? He has definitely killed people in Vicini's service. This has absolutely happened. And yet we can kind of gloss that because we don't dive into it. He is in that way, I suppose, a roguish figure, not unlike Han Solo. Right? Obviously, there are other ways in which he's completely different from Han Solo. He is driven by a primary and personal plot that is absolutely distinct from Han's kind of freewheeling desire to simply make money and evade capture. It's a very different plot trajectory for each of these characters, but there are elements of archetypal commonality between the two, I think. Yeah, absolutely hair from a different era, says Becca. Yeah, this whole exposition is just fantastic. Oh, Jonathan pointing out he's so great. I forgot he has a great bit as 88 Keys and Dick Tracy with Madonna. So terrific. Yeah, Dick Tracy 1990, right? The year after the Tim Burton Batman movie, when everyone thought the comic book movies were going to be a big thing. Gosh, how wrong we were. I actually love that Warren Beatty Dick Tracy movie with a large part of my heart. Mandy Patinkin as 88 Keys is fantastic. Madonna as Breathless Mahoney was formative. For me, I was 12 when that movie came out, 13 when that movie came out. So yeah, formative. Let me catch up. Very much the traditional swashbuckler archetype. Jonathan, you have, as you so often do, put your finger on it precisely. Yes, the swashbuckler archetype. Han has elements of that within his characterization, and Inigo also, I don't think, is a complete version of that. But there's in the Venn diagram of these two characters, that's the shaded crossover part. Yeah, absolutely. Good. And Andre the Giant is kind of like a Wookiee, says Keldarts Winters. Yeah, yep, fair. Oh, that hard cut to the close-up where we get the speech. I definitely can't talk over that. That's just gorgeous. Yeah. And then we bring the tone right back down, right? The music drops out. We get the line from Wesley, and then we just, there we go. Okay. It's very modern. It's very satirical, I suppose, in its intent, which I really quite like. And then this music cue is burned in my memory for all time. That ring of steel as he draws his sword. A great line. And that string coming in there. We do that all the way through the movie. We will use that sustained string just to hold the tension, It's absolutely perfect. Of course, Wesley's character in this phase of the film absolutely modeled on Errol Flynn. You know, hence the mustache. I guess there's really no other reason to make that mustache decision, is there? Like Inigo's mustache, I can completely get. This is stunning. You'll see, right? Because we have such skilled actors who know the choreography, we don't have to engage in any digital trickery here. We don't have to engage in any cinematographic trickery. We can just have them actually fight and just actually film it. Contrast this with something like, you know, the Zack Snyder oeuvre or the Michael Bay movies where we cut every 15th of a second. You know, for the longest time when I was growing up, I thought that line was, unless the enemy has studied his Agrippa, where Inigo just goes a little Mario for no reason, just goes a little stereotypical Italian for a while until I realized, oh no, Agrippa. Right. Okay. That makes a lot more sense. The set is fantastic too. The set is so much larger than it needs to be, which I completely love because it gives that depth to the shots as we're watching our actors move around. We're getting this deep depth in the background. Not so much in this section, but previously, I guess. And the way that we're marking those sword strokes with the string stings and this flourish. The horns come in to give our little fanfare for Wesley, who is so clearly our hero, even though everything we know about this movie should tell us that, you know, men in masks cannot be trusted. So that's one of the shots that is a stunt person shot, and here is the other. Neither Mandy Patinkin nor Carrie Ellis did the swing on the bar, I suppose. I love that as he hits the sand, you can see the delineation of the rectangular crash map beneath it. It's so... I can't help but love it, you guys. Now I'm just watching the movie. I'm terribly sorry. This is just lovely. Yeah. Jonathan Nash saying the composer must have had such a great time with this set piece. No kidding. And it's all in the editing too, right? It's there it is. The little sting again as Inigo catches his sword. Real good. Real good. Wow, Angela's saying they added the stairs and cliff in one day, part of the quick edition. Oh, how interesting. Okay. And Mandy's okay was improvised. I didn't know that. That's fascinating. I take it, Angela, you've been reading the Carrie Elwes book, the Inconceivable Story. I can never remember what that book is called, but the book about the production of The Princess Bride. I started that. I was between a third and a half of the way through it, I suppose, and then never got around to finishing it. And honestly, listened to it so quickly and while I was distracted with other things that a lot of it has kind of filtered out of my head. So that is the end of the first challenge that our hero will face. He has tested his skill and been victorious. We are 25 minutes into this 100-minute movie at this point. This is enormously swift. My greatest pleasure watching this Fezzik sequence now is looking at how it is shot and how it is framed and looking at the workarounds they had for the just ruined physical state of Andre the Giant at this point. He was, of course, by this point, one of the most famous wrestlers in the entire world. In 1987, I guess he was just completing his 15-year undefeated streak in the WWF. he was it. There were no wrestlers bigger in either sense than Andre the Giant in 1987. Which was just around the time, I suppose, that I was getting into wrestling. And, I was a fan of WWF while it was still WWF for a few years, as I think most young boys are. Actually came back to wrestling just a couple of years ago, came back to the WWE for SummerSlam what was that, 2015, 2016, maybe? And thoroughly enjoyed the experience. I've kind of been keeping up with it here and there, but haven't managed to really sit down and absorb the full, 6-hour extravaganza of a new WrestleMania or a new other event. But I'm always tempted by that $10 a month WWE network, like watch as much as you want from any period that you want deal that they offer. That's pretty attractive. Yeah. Brandon saying I was 1 in 1987. Yes, As You Wish is the name of the book. Thank you, Angela. The audiobook version. Absolutely. Yes. Good. Thomas saying he was not undefeated during that streak. They built that leading up to WrestleMania 3. So did they retcon an undefeated streak onto Andre the Giant? That's really interesting. That's, of course, by no means the most audacious narrative thing that the WWF ever did back in the day, Yeah. God, that's interesting. I was 1 in 87. You guys are all just babies. I don't know what to do with you. Yeah, I turned 40 in 6 weeks there or thereabouts, the middle of June. So I'm thinking a lot about my own, incipient mortality at this point. Yeah. It's just they're terribly comfortable. I think everyone will be wearing them in the future is a very, very cute line. Oof. Yeah, there's something about the pacing of this scene that just doesn't quite hang for me. And I'm really not sure what it is. I know that a lot of people who watch this movie struggle with Andre the Giant's voice, right? They just struggle with his accent. It's just difficult necessarily to pick out all of his dialogue. I know that there were a couple of lines back when they were doing the rhyming game. There were a couple of lines that eluded me for years, I think, until I just watched it with closed captioning. And, that's what he's been saying this whole time. I've kind of internalized the line just phonetically, but I'd never really understood the point of the line. But yeah. But it's just so slow and kind of sweet, kind of good-hearted. Inigo Montoya is a character possessed of enormous motivation. He has a singular goal and he is working to accomplish it, right? Fezzik doesn't really have that same goal. He doesn't have that same drive. He's kind of passive in a scene in which he is fighting a mysterious man in black. Odd. And of course, here we get our introduction to the hunting party. We get Humperdinck just really messing up those footprints by trying to trace them, I guess. But apparently demonstrating his skill as a renowned tracker. We get Count Rogan here, the six-fingered man, and the hunting party, his soldiers. I don't know. Although I suppose I was just thinking about that line. Follow those footprints toward Gilda. That's why the soldiers are here, right? The soldiers are here so that they can go back and report, no, the prince was so consumed with vengeance and with the love of his princess that he was chasing her across the frontier. That's the story. This is him telling the story of the Gildorian abduction of Buttercup, right? This is his, as we'll find out in the third act of this movie, this is his pretext for war. This is his casus belli, to launch an all-out war with Gilda. So that's why the soldiers are there. I've just figured this out now. This is viewing 101 for me of The Princess Bride, and that just makes sense. Yeah. Good. Yeah, Matt saying Humperdinck displaying surprising capability here. Yeah, I actually quite like that. He's a bad guy, but he's not incompetent. We're not playing Humperdinck for the joke in the way that we would, okay, God, I hate to do this, but obviously, right, one of the most obvious points of comparison that you can draw in modern pop culture would be a character like Lord Farquaad from the Shrek movies, right? We don't do that with Humperdinck. We don't diminish him in that way. We don't make him a joke. We kind of elevate his capability to make him more evil, as we do with Count Rogan. So Wesley has overcome his test of skill. He has overcome his test of strength, and now he is facing his test of wit. This is classic fairy tale construction. This is gorgeous 3-beat construction. He wins the first and second fairly, and we subvert the 3-beat here. Well, okay. He wins the first fairly. He is just a better swordsman than Inigo is. He wins the second fairly in the sense that he physically overcomes Fezzik. And then in the third instance, of course, we subvert our expectation of the 3-beat and he tricks the trickster. He responds to the Loki-ish figure of Vicini in an entirely appropriate way. What you do not smell is called iocane powder. Oh, Skylar asking, where's The Last Jedi review? You must be coming in late, Skylar. Yes, it was supposed to be out today. I'm afraid it was momentarily delayed, but it will be available sometime over the weekend. It will be available before Monday morning. Cast iron guarantee. It is pretty much ready to go. I just have to finish the editing and then get it uploaded. That was supposed to be the Star Wars Day special event that I had planned for today, but family life gets in the way sometimes, you guys. So it was, momentarily delayed. My apologies for that. But as I said earlier, I'm also going to be laying out the schedule for the next batch of Story in Star Wars. We're basically doing a full second season of Story in Star Wars that's going to come out on a very regular basis over the course of the next 2.5 months, I suppose. That's pretty much where we are. So, and I'm sure that during that process, I will also think of other things to talk about. So that may well be extended. But there are a bushel full of Story in Star Wars episodes coming very soon. I don't like this show being an intermittent show. I really want to get it back on a regular schedule. Intermittent shows just don't work for me. Doing it as and when, just no. With that discipline, I don't rise to the occasion as I would like. So I'm not going to make promises about an indefinite and ongoing Story in Star Wars series, but yeah. Anyway, let's talk about oh, Jonathan saying some Rebels inclusion. I would love to, and the new series too. Yeah. It's just a lot of material to catch up. I don't know. I love this golden age of Hollywood banter, call and response kind of conversation here between Vicini and Wesley. The interplay here is weirdly, for all that this is clearly shot on location, right? For all this is shot, gosh, I didn't know. This is just above the cliffs of Dover. So I'm not entirely sure of where exactly they shot this, but for all that this is shot outside, this is probably the most theatrical sequence that we get in the entire movie. You know, obviously it's very tempting to call the My Dinner with Andre parallel here, but yeah. No physical action, but everything is given in the performances. It's in the camera work. It's in the music coming up. But even now, you'll note that the camera work is very, very simple. We get the focus shot on Vicini. We get the reverse shot on Wesley. We get occasional framing shots pulled back, like that 2 shot there of Vicini and Buttercup, who just sits silently through this whole thing, right? I love how stagey and terrible that "what in the world can that be" voice is. It's very, very good. Vicini should be a better actor than that. I like to think he's just enjoying himself here, demonstrating that he can do a terrible performance and still trick Wesley. He was very foresighted to carry with him that wine and the goblets and all of this little picnic that they have there. Very civil is Vicini, the Sicilian. Watch the comic timing here, right? Watch how long we hold this shot on Wallace Shawn and hear the rhythm of his line, right? So we get the cutaway and we're back. This is beautifully, beautifully constructed. The editing here is just gorgeous. Oh, Matt saying, unfortunate that Buttercup had not realized she could very easily physically overpower the diminutive Vicini and get free. Yes, no kidding. Oh, Marshall asking, any chance Story in Star Wars might look at the old EU someday? There were certainly some diamonds in the rough there, man. I love the old EU. I got to tell you, your Jedi Academy trilogy, the Thrawn books, of course, are the most powerful. Tales from the Cantina. I would love to. Finding the time to do that kind of deep dive is tough. Maybe we could do a special celebratory one. Maybe we could just pick one, right? We could pick one old novel and dive into it. That would be really fun. There's a ton of stuff that I like. Yeah, good suggestion. Yes, good. Oh, Angela's saying it was Rob's idea for Wallace to fall over. That was improvised on the set. That's lovely. Yeah. Rob Reiner has... It's interesting that at this point in his career, he was very much considered a bankable director. You know, that's why Paramount, when he went to Paramount to ask for the money to make The Princess Bride, they originally said, no. Are you crazy? We've been trying for 15 years. People have been trying for 15 years to make this movie, and it's never going to happen. But Rob Reiner was recognized as someone who could just deliver, right? He could just make a competent movie, I suppose. Maybe not an A+ blockbuster movie. Maybe he wasn't going to make as much money in 1987 as Three Men and a Baby, which was shot for almost exactly the same amount of money and made 10 times more. Well, not 10 times more, but 8 times more, I suppose, than The Princess Bride did. But he was recognized as a safe pair of hands, and yet has always managed to bring to his work a level of warmth and spontaneity and I don't know why I'm inclined toward the word charity here, but it feels right. There's like an empathic kind of reciprocal relationship that he has with his actors, clearly. And I've told the story before that while they were shooting this in England, he rented a big old house for like the 3 months that he was in England for, and he would invite cast and crew over for huge and lavish dinner parties throughout the entire production so that they could get to know one another and get to hang out and get to have this kind of this very social and familial entanglement as they were making this film, which I think absolutely shines through in the intimacy of these performances. I think that might be the challenge to Humperdinck, actually, is that he is called upon to, here in the first act, though actually we're here at the first act turn, right? When I was talking about Buttercup controlling the movement of the action, here she controls the movement of the action, because we're about to transition from the first act into the second act. What is the marker for that transition? It is Buttercup learning again that Wesley is alive. Buttercup learns that Wesley is alive, not because he tells her, but because she takes action. She saves herself and pushes him down the cliff. Buttercup takes the action that transitions us into the second act, and she is changed by the transition into the second act. It's a powerful marker of protagonism in the course of this film. I love her performance in this too. She's an extremely deep actress, which I really appreciate, right? Her performances are, even here where she's fairly superficial, right? Buttercup is not a deeply written character, I think, but Robin Wright is consistently capable of bringing an emotional authenticity to roles that demand much less emotional authenticity. I like it quite a lot. Yes, Marshall saying that Rob Reiner is proof for me that you don't need to go with the Hitchcockian, Kubrickian director method of terrorizing and abusing your actors to elicit a good performance from them. So say we all, Marshall. So say we all. You are absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Brandon saying Princess Bride will probably always be my #1 favorite movie, but it's one of those movies it's just hard to say why it is so endearing. It really is all over the place tonally and performance-wise. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It is all over the place tonally. It is all over the place performance-wise. It is all over the place texturally, right? The feel of different scenes is very, very different from beat to beat as we move through this film. The score swings hard from really powerful and sometimes extremely dramatic and effective, sometimes very playful and effective, to really quite banal and uninspired, I suppose. Some of the cinematography is fantastic. Some of it is just kind of run of the mill. What makes The Princess Bride work for me personally is that emotional resonance that you get at the end of the story. The Princess Bride, as a story about stories, delivers a powerful emotional kick if you, like me, love stories. There it is. There's our turn into the second act, 38.5 minutes in. And another moment just of great power, choosing to throw herself down this bank too. Very lovely, yeah. Gosh, look at that geography. That's amazing. Oh, every time I've watched that, I think that must have really, really hurt. That clearly, by the way, isn't Carrie Ellis rolling down the hill. Yeah, he didn't shoot. He shot that one stunt scene back in the fight, but obviously there are other stunt performers credited in this movie. Yeah. As you wish, says Angela Lurie. Absolutely right. Yeah, Jonathan saying, interesting that this is the direct follow-up for Reiner as a director to Stand By Me. Yeah, that was the movie that got him. It was actually while he was directing Stand By Me that he fell in love with the idea of adapting The Princess Bride. So he kind of had that in his back pocket as he was moving through that movie, which, yeah, I find completely inspiring. He does tell a story. I think I talked about this during during the previous lecture discussion. I don't remember. Rob Reiner does tell a story about being given a copy of The Princess Bride by his father when he was a child, which is completely impossible because Rob Reiner was in his mid to late 20s by the time the novel was released in 1973. Yeah, so a little bit of fairy tale fictionalization there, a little pleasing fantasy to better tell the story of the film, right? Carrie Elwes also credits a love of The Princess Bride from the original book, but he was much younger. He was 10 or 11 when the book came out. It has been a long, long time. How do we know that we're demarcating the second act turn here? Because we break back out of the frame. We're back out of the core narrative into the frame narrative, and look at where we are now. It's lunchtime. We're eating the world's thinnest sandwich. We're, sipping our coffee, kind of moving forward with the story. It's just lovely. I've often wondered how long it took Peter Falk and Fred Savage to shoot this entire frame. I wonder if they did it in the course of a day. I would imagine probably not, because, there are lighting changes within the frame of that scene. So lighting changes take forever when you're shooting a movie. So it was probably a 2 or 3 day shoot, but very, very good, very effective. And now we transition into the fire swamp. This is going to take us through the first half of the second act. As I said previously, it's the emergence from the fire swamp, specifically Buttercup's decision as they emerge from the fire swamp, that transforms the trajectory of the story and moves us through our midpoint into the second half of the second act. And again, look for that 3 trial structure, right? Wesley's already overcome one set of 3 trials, and now they together are going to overcome another set of 3 trials. Good. Let me see. Oh, Tom's asking, is Porkins in this movie? Matt's confirming no. William Hootkins is not in this film. Oh, that's too bad. That's too bad. That would have been a nice nod for Star Wars Day. Yeah, I would have been surprised that I didn't know it, but yeah. I love holding that look. I love how the production is reflexively engaged with the script of this film. It's very, very strong. We do so much with silence and with performance and with a look here and there. It's very effective. Yeah. So obviously we're back on our stage, our sound stage here, right? This is obviously an indoor shoot. We're not shooting this on location, but that works for me again because we've kind of transitioned back into fairy. We've moved out of the realm of the naturalistic world into a more magical realm. That's what the fire swamp is here again, right? The flame spurts. Weirdly less chemistry between Wesley and Buttercup in this part of the film, right? Do you guys feel that? I feel that when he's doing the farm boy thing, he's I don't know, just very connected to her, very intimately connected to her. But now he's doing his dashing pirate Captain Errol Flynn thing. He's got that little smirk. He's got that little swagger. He's just not quite the same earnest boy that he was. This exposition is just fantastic. Oh, Angela's saying that Fred Savage ran into Mandy once and was like, we shared this amazing experience but never filmed together, so do we hug? And Mandy hugged him. That's very sweet. Yes. They've wandered into Dagobah, says Matt. Yeah, no kidding, right? 100% Dagobah. And Marshall's giving us some Yoda dialogue that I won't try and imitate at this point of the evening without, a few more adult beverages. Good. Seth is joining us for the first time. Hello, Seth. Glad to have you with us. Excellent. Excellent. This story of the Dread Pirate Roberts, here we are, of course, telling stories about telling stories. Here, Wesley is relating to Buttercup the tale of the Dread Pirate Roberts, not just his own personal experience, but the story that has taken on such narrative weight that it has become itself mythic. The notional Dread Pirate Roberts is a figure of fear. He's a figure of power and capability and capacity in a way that replacement pirate captains just wouldn't be. We understand perfectly in this film how to tell stories and what stories are for. The crossing of the bridge there is very good. Now I'm just listening to Carrie Ellis deliver this dialogue, which is just wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, most likely kill you in the morning, says Angela. Right? It's such a great mythic construct. It's such a powerful idea. Yeah. And full credit to Robin Wright for just listening to all of this and then giving us that one look that indicates, well, gosh, so much. The nod, the furrowed brow, the turn away. Ah! And now the lightning sand. So we've had the flame spurts. Here's the lightning sand. And a scene that always stressed me out horribly when I was a kid. I don't have like a great fear of suffocation or anything like that. This doesn't speak to like any deep abiding phobia or something. I think it's not even the ROUS that ambles past here. It's, I think, just the amount of time that we sustain that shot. We just hold it so long. And then, of course, the sand on the faces as they come out and kind of collapse gasping. I don't like having like sand all over me. It's just horribly uncomfortable. So yeah. That's pretty much my emotional response to this, but yeah, awesome. And as they emerge from the sand and he takes that deep breath, and I think, how much sand did you just breathe in? None of the coughing that we're going to get through the rest of the scene is fake, is it? You're actually just living this moment. Yes, Matt saying that I pointed out before that Wesley obviously sees the ROUSs right as he says that they don't exist. Yeah, I don't love this. I got to tell you, I don't, because this is Okay, I'm hesitating before I make a declarative statement. You guys drink. That's definitely on the Point North Media bingo card. Is that the only lie that he tells Buttercup? Because he lies to her clearly right now, right? He's talking again. Here he is telling her the story. He sees the ROUS. He clearly sees it, and he is about to tell her that they don't exist. But they're succeeding here because he is telling her the story of how they have succeeded. He's telling her the story of them vanquishing the fire swamp. Yeah. Oh, Nikki does have claustrophobia. That's terrible. Yeah. Marshall saying the mention of Patagonia just drives some of the whimsical and anachronistic nature of the setting. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It does speak to an interesting beat in the Goldman original novel, I suppose, which isn't really echoed in the movie. Yeah, I don't think they exist for the comedic beat of the rodent of unusual size pouncing on him at that moment. I don't like him lying to Buttercup. I think pretty much any other line there is better, or better yet, play the dramatic irony. Why does he see the ROUSs when he and Buttercup are recovering by the tree? Why give him that information? If we have the shot of the lightning sand and it's still for that moment, and then the ROUS ambles by, and then they emerge, and he then gets his beat. I don't think they exist, and he doesn't know that they do, and then the attack comes. We're still primed in exactly the same way. We still see it. We still connect back, but it creates a dramatic irony because we know something that he doesn't know, that we are not left-handed. No, not that. That ROUSs really exist. Yeah, good. I was saying about Patagonia. There's an element in the Goldman original, in the attributed text to S. Morgenstern, I suppose, where he's playing with some of the elements of like the forerunners of modern fantasy, right? Back in the day, before we were telling fantasy stories, we would tell stories of very distant, unfathomably distant places. That once a man traveled to India and he saw remarkable things which are absolutely impossible, right? Made up stories that are allowed to be fabricated, that are allowed to be fictional because they happen in a very distant place. We get this from, traditional kind of journey writers, epic journey writers. The stings here as he drives his sword into the ROUS. The 2 beats and then the descending beat. Ah, beautiful. Well, now everything's okay, right? That's what I'm talking about, that depth of performance from Robin Wright. It's just lovely. So much she is so overwhelmed in that moment, and I completely understand why. Yeah, so I love the kind of throwback interaction that we get from the novel to writers predating, but most perfectly embodied in that Swiftian tradition, I suppose. We don't really get that in the movie, save for the reference to Patagonia, which I like quite a lot. Yeah. Matt is saying perhaps they were from different versions of the shoot and then for some reason kept in the edit together. Yeah, no, it's entirely possible, but just wish they hadn't done it. This is great, though. This is, I think, exactly what got Cary Elwes the role in Robin Hood Men in Tights, right? This is sassy. This is witty. And then the double, what was that? Very good. So this is Buttercup's decision. She makes this choice. Will you promise not to hurt him? I lost you once. I can't bear to do it again. This is Buttercup making the choice to give up the love of her life, who was just returned to her, in order to save him. She is taking action. Once again, just like the end of the first act when she pushes Wesley down the cliff. Now she is taking action. Now she is changing the course of the action, changing the course of the plot. She is controlling this story in a way that Wesley just doesn't until the third act, right? So he comes in, but his rescue of her is a subplot, and of course he's going to be dead for a while before then. She's just scooped up into that saddle too. It's a deft bit of writing from Humperdinck. And then we get one of my favorite lines in the entire movie. Yeah. Nikki observing, there are a lot of modern comedic movies that use the wild animal attacking the face scene. You're so right, Nikki. That is such a modern beat, right? That's such a modern idea. I've seen that countless times. We are men of action. Lies do not become us. Well spoken, sir. And then the glove is less than convincing, I must admit, but I like it very much. Christopher Guest is just brilliant. I love the way that he commits to this role. Kind of giving maybe his Tim Curryest role ever, right? It's worth noting, think I've mentioned this before, but in that sequence, Cary Elwes asked Christopher Guest not to pull his punch when he hits him on the head with the sword hilt. So Christopher Guest didn't, and Cary Elwes spent the day in the infirmary recovering because it was apparently a pretty solid blow there. Yeah, it also has that horrible mid-80s Foley sound effect of someone being hit in the head. I don't know why this has endured in my memory so perfectly, except that it grossed me out the first time that I saw it and has grossed me out every time that I have seen it subsequently, which, let me tell you, is literally dozens of times. Remember that sequence in Back to the Future when Marty McFly is spying on, when Marty is watching George spying on Lorraine, and George falls out of the tree into traffic, and Marty rushes out, pushes him out of the way, thereby saving his father. Then he gets hit by the truck and gets knocked down onto the road, and he tries to raise his head, and then his head drops back onto the asphalt. And we get a sound effect that defies explanation, that defies definition. I don't know how they made that sound effect, and I don't know. It sounds like someone slapping a partly deflated basketball with a large piece of ham. It is a very unpleasant sound effect, and it haunts my memory. I hate head-related sound effects, apparently head-related Foley work. I didn't know that I hated that until now, but apparently I did. The albino here, played by Mel Smith of the British comedy duo Smith and Jones, one of my favorite comedy duos growing up. I really, really loved his work. He never really broke out, I suppose, as many of his peers did in the British comedy scene at that time, but he was a reliable presence in the British comedy scene for, gosh, a decade, I guess, on television through the BBC. Buttercup now completely dispirited. She has given up her life. She has given up her hope. She believes that she can bear this pain. We know that she believes that she can bear this pain because when she realizes that she can't bear this pain, she goes straight to Humperdinck. It comes to this, she says to him. That's it. And the dream sequence, of course. The other thing that freaks me out about this movie. Yeah, yeah. Matt said that he loves my take on the Back to the Future audio commentary. You're very audible, Winston. Yes, yes. Oof. Matt is asking, what if Buttercup is her last name and her unspoken first name is Peanut? Then I think I love her more. Yeah. I think to escape the constraints of that name and achieve all that she achieves. Yeah. Yep. Oh, Tom saying we are men of action. We're allowed to not become a number 3 favorite line. Yeah, good. Oh, Count Rugen's fingers go up to 11, says Matt. Excellent. Time back through Christopher Guest's Final Tat. Again, all of this time, never thought about it. But yeah, very good. Oh, Brandon, what if her first name is Build Me Up? Build Me Up, also a very good first name for Princess Buttercup. You guys. Yeah. Love her as I love her, says Angela Louis. Yeah, yeah. That crown is insane, too. I believe that this woman is credited in the screenplay for The Princess Bride as Ancient Booer, Booer, which I love quite a lot. Peter Cook's role at the end of this movie, Mowage, like that role is described in the screenplay as impressive clergyman, which I like a lot. I actually read I read an earlier draft and then the shooting script for The Princess Bride, which you can find around online. The early draft is basically, it is a draft, right? There's no major deviation from the shooting script that they wound up using, but it's a really interesting read. William Goldman is very, very good at what he does, it turns out. Of all the lines that I quote from The Princess Bride, yes, you're very smart, shut up, maybe the most common. Yeah. This is beautifully done too, because in the book, this echoes that moment of realization that she has when she realizes she loves Wesley for the first time, right? When she realizes that all of a sudden, after Wesley is being seduced by the charming Countess, she realizes that she loves Wesley, and she gets up in the middle of the night and goes to tell him. She just pours out her heart in this page of attributed dialogue, which is maybe the best thing William Goldman's ever written. Like, I completely understand why we don't get it in the movie. It would not fit the tone of this movie, like, at all, but it is fantastic. And then Wesley just very quietly closes the door in her face, which is, yeah, just lovely. Just lovely. That's what happens after she realizes that that as you wish means I love you. Again, controlling the story here. Pirates are not men of the words. So I will tell you the story of what I'm going to do, and you can agree that this is a perfectly reasonable compromise. Matt says Buttercup is just playing everyone against each other, waiting them out until she ascends to the presidency. Yeah, she'll look a little different by that point, but yes, she came from Themyscira, spent a little time in Florin, and now the White House waits. Yeah, good. Oh, Angela says, I think the actress does a great job, and I always find myself acting her lines with her. Yeah, are we talking about Robin Wright? Yeah. Yes, Robin Wright, 19, I think she had her birthday, right? So she was 19 when they started filming, 20 when they ended filming, and Carrie Ellis was 23. Oh, Carrie Ellis was the one who had the birthday party during filming. Angela's clarifying here in the chat. Yes. Oh, interesting. Okay, so would any of the good guys be a Slytherin, says Melissa. No. I'm going to say no. I don't think so, but I also don't necessarily think that we get. No, I don't think so. I think I would be inclined to see Fezzik and Vicini, certainly Slytherin, right? Humperdinck, Count Rogan, all very, very Slytherin, absolutely. Mostly for the ambition, right? This is not just associating evil characters with Slytherin, but because they are all in their way ambitious and ruthless and merciless, primary Slytherin traits. I love that little beat of intimacy there. It's so unnecessary, and it's so sweet and feels so genuine. I just love that very much. I would put Fezzik and Buttercup in Hufflepuff, I guess. Wesley is smart enough and resourceful enough to be a Ravenclaw, but he and Inigo are clearly Gryffindors because they are driven by that personal agency, that personal autonomy. They are driven by their own capacity for action and their own ability to take charge of the narratives that they are in, even when that ability is actually somewhat compromised or actually somewhat dubious. Yeah. Gilded to frame for it, I'm swamped. Yes, yeah, no. Miracle Max is Slytherin. Oh, interesting. Well, yeah, that would depend, wouldn't it? Was Miracle Max always this guy, or has he been so completely intimidated by Humperdinck that he is a different man now? I guess he can't always have been this guy, because otherwise Valerie wouldn't respond to Max the way that she does, right? If he had just always been this way, I don't think their relationship would be anchored in that kind of disappointment. Of course, we're jumping ahead to Miracle Max and Valerie, yeah. Good. Oh, Rugen is Clytus to Humperdinck's Ming, says Matt Reyes. Yeah, good pull. Flash Gordon would be a really good one shot to do. As I'm talking about like serials and that kind of bombastic golden age science fiction, that would be a really interesting movie to do. I do adore that movie. Yeah, good. Every line that Christopher Guest gets in this movie is just gorgeous. Yeah. The way we hold this, and then just the weeping. Yeah, again, everything in the production working to elevate what is already a very, very powerful script. This is very, again, very theatrical, right? The blocking here, even very theatrical. Yeah. Yeah, Pulp Heroes one shot, says Jonathan. The Shadow, The Phantom, Dick Tracy. Yeah, that would all be very, very good, right? Actually, Pulp Heroes would be fascinating. Yeah. I would love the opportunity to talk about Dick Tracy. I think maybe a one-shot season on Pulp Heroes going back, right? Like do like a Doc Samson, do like a yeah. That's a really interesting idea. And to look at how that pulp tradition has been transformed into a modern blockbuster tradition in a really interesting way. That point of intersection for like what we now think of as big budget ensemble action movies that would in the day have been kind of, two-fisted men of action kind of stories. Yeah. Huh. That's what we're thinking about, Jonathan. Thank you for that. Yeah. Oh, Sky Captain, the World of Tomorrow. He mentions. Yes, excellent, excellent. Oh, the Howard story. We're talking about Conan there. Yeah. Oh, Conan the Barbarian one shot, says Marshall. Yes. Oh, and Angela's saying I thought about Flash Gordon again after rewatching Thor Ragnarok. Yes. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, good. Yeah, the old Robert E. Howard stories. I devoured Howard around the same time as I initially devoured Lovecraft and just kind of burned through both of their bodies of work, not comprehensively, but in, gosh, largest part. And yeah, very, God, so rich, so evocative. I mean, obviously very problematic. Both writers very problematic from a modern perspective, but yeah, capable of crafting these incredibly powerful stories, these operatic stories in relatively confined spaces, oftentimes, which is really interesting. Mandy Patinkin given this performance, which isn't just grounded, but is so intense that sword blade of intensity from him in his performance is perfect. And reunification with a rhyme that I didn't realize was a rhyme for the longest time. Obviously, I just inadvertently rhymed there too. I'm basically like Fezzik in a lot of ways, just like in a lot of ways. Casual backhand slap to the other member of the Brute Squad. It's very good. So now we get another montage, right? And this is where Inigo takes control of the story, and he is going to have control of the story basically until they're on the ramparts, right? And even then, he's never really going to relinquish control of the story. I suppose until he slays Count Rogan at the end of the movie, he's never really going to relinquish control of the primary core narrative here. Instead, he's going to share it. We're going to draw together some of these threads to a certain degree, but not completely. It is personal loyalty that makes Wesley interested in what happens to the Six-Fingered Man, and like a debt of honor to Inigo. It is not actually relevant to the proceedings, right? They can definitely rescue Buttercup without ever dealing with the Six-Fingered Man. It's very good. The sequence of planning is so great too. As he counts on his fingers. Again, I've seen this movie literally 100 times and it still makes me laugh. Yeah. Yes, Matt pointing out, notice the steam. One barrel is cold water, the other hot. I will admit, in my early 20s, when I was more prone to evenings of convivial celebration and perhaps an adult beverage or two with friends, I often wondered about this as a hangover cure, because I feel intuitively that it would be terrible, but it would probably work, right? I feel as though even if you were actively drunk, not even hungover, but if you were actively drunk, I feel like that alternate plunging into cold water and hot water, I mean, there is like a 5% chance it would just kill you dead. It would resolve your problem in a very permanent fashion. But yeah, I feel intuitively that it would work, and yet have never had the opportunity to do it, because of course the last thing I'm going to do when I'm hungover, particularly in my early 20s, is prepare 2 large wooden basins of cold and hot water. Yeah, good. Oh, the Kindle versions of both Howard's and Lovecraft's collected works are on sale for 99 cents each on Amazon, says Marshall. We are definitely doing a discussion at some point of Lovecraft. I just recently completed the most recent poll for the Point North Media Book Club. If you guys don't know, perhaps if you pledge your support over at patreon.com/pointnorthmedia and support this endeavor financially so that I can make more podcasts and don't have to worry about, other work. Every dollar that you pledge is turned magically into minutes of audio entertainment. If you are a supporter over on the Patreon page, then you get to pick a book club text that we discuss every week in a dedicated Patreon exclusive book club session. We just finished up our discussion of Good Omens, and on Monday evening, we are launching into our discussion of the next book club text selected by the Point North Media faithful, which is the first season of the BBC Sherlock series from 2010, which is going to be absolutely fascinating. We're going to spend 4 weeks doing that, and then we're going to discuss Frank Herbert's Dune. So if you're interested in either of those discussions, or if you would like to contribute your voice and vote to a future book club discussion, patreon.com/pointnorthmedia. Yeah. Good. Matt's pointing out the exquisite dress on Buttercup. A lot of the costuming, again, very theatrical, very fairy tale, very kind of conventional in its way, but absolutely there. Yeah. Another moment of Buttercup saving herself here, I think, with words rather than action this time. And it haunts me that we get that repetition of that line. I would not say such things if I were you. It doesn't hang for me, I'm afraid. I don't like that delivery. I don't like the repetition of the line at all, but I desperately dislike the intonation that's given to the second line. You truly love each other, and so you might have been truly happy. Not one couple in a century has that chance, no matter what the storybooks say. This is... That's a very intense moment right there. Again, stories and storytelling, right? This is appropriately narrative, I suppose. Your story is so great, your story is so beautiful that your suffering must be equal to that. This isn't just about personal betrayal. He doesn't frame it as personal betrayal, as if Humperdinck has a right to feel betrayed about anything, but it isn't about personal jealousy or greed or frustrated desire. It's something greater than that. He's haunted by the mythic quality here. Humperdinck is a man more engaged in stories and storytelling than most in this story, right? Love her as I loved her. All of that stuff is about storytelling. It's all about controlling that narrative. And Humperdinck considers himself clearly a master of it, right? He clearly considers himself a very deft and skilled storyteller. And when the story gets away from him, when the story is outside of his control, it frustrates him to the point of killing Wesley outright. And that scream, yeah, is very bad, yeah. Oh, Tom's saying that he hasn't listened to the book club since Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That was a really fun one. Yeah, Melissa's saying, I hate the booing woman, probably the only scene I'd skip. Yeah, I don't like booing woman either. I don't... God, but I do love the frame break, though. I still feel like I haven't quite got a handle on Inigo in this scene. I don't quite understand why we take this sidestep from Inigo's own capability and increasing desperation into this appeal to the spirit of his father, right? I could understand a prayer for justice, like a genuine prayer, more than appealing to the spirit of his father, who just hasn't been mentioned, for the spirit of his father who has not been a constant presence all the way through, right? If he had said back to Wesley on the Cliffs of Insanity, and I still feel my father's presence with him, and I know that he cannot rest until I take care of this outstanding debt of honor, maybe. But it feels like an odd turn. It's beautifully shot and brilliantly performed, but I don't completely understand it. That look of failure again, and falling on the foreshadowed tree knot there. Now, here's a thing to look at, right? Because we're about to rescue Wesley, we're about to resurrect Wesley, and we have like a half hour left in this film. We are already through the bulk of the action. Yeah. And again, this intrusion from, hey, just the cutest little boy in the world, right? Fred Savage is just adorable in this. But here he's expressing something extremely powerful. Wesley's only faking. He can't be dead. Who kills Humperdinck at the end? He understands how stories work, because we all understand how stories work. And the fact that this story isn't going to play out exactly as we expect it to is part of its power. In every way, from every angle, from every perspective, this is a story about stories. And that, I think, to answer that earlier question, is why this story is so powerful, why it connects so deeply and intimately with so many people, and why it stands up to so much repetition, why it has earned its place in the pop cultural firmament. Yeah. Good. Yeah, Matt's asking... Matt's asking, raise your hand if you were disappointed that Infinity War does not feature Downey snapping to Cumberbatch, no shit Sherlock. Yeah, I've got to admit, it wasn't until after I had left the theater watching Infinity War and I was recording a podcast about it, and one of my co-hosts pointed out that they had both played Sherlock, that occurred to me at all. For some reason, even though I quite enjoyed them, the first one significantly more than the second one, the Guy Ritchie Sherlock movies have done nothing to impress themselves upon my memory at all. Unless I am actively and purposefully thinking of those movies, I have no recollection of them whatsoever. But yeah, it's very cute. My go-to reference for like commonality with Sherlock is, of course, the Peter Jackson Hobbit trilogy that has both Martin Freeman playing Bilbo Baggins and Benedict Cumberbatch playing the voice of the necromancer at Dol Guldur and the voice of Smaug, which is fantastic. So Billy Crystal, definitely the most anachronistic presence in this story, and I might even include the framing device in that. This is a very different kind of performance. It's bringing some much needed levity to the third act here, right? It's and there is a sadness to it. There is a depth to it that I really. But yeah, arguably Slytherin. I'm not sure. Yeah, yeah. Wow, Angela says Billy Crystal was a 3-day whirlwind of filming. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of action because you've got three distinct setups here that you need to shoot him on, and that always takes a lot of time. We're not doing the shifting lighting, but this is when you've got this many actors compressed into a space this small, it's difficult to shoot. So yeah, that's fast. Oh, Matt pointing out that the score from the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes movies did seem to influence that of the BBC series. However, yeah, absolutely, that's very true. And Angela confirming what I have long since suspected, that Billy Crystal did, of course, improv most of the conversation with Valerie. Yeah, it's just lovely. With Carol Kane, I should say. Yeah, good. Matt says that both Billy Crystal and Carol Kane looking pretty much exactly like this these days. Yeah, was it when I was watching Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt? That was Valerie. Weird. Only mostly dead. For those of you curious at home, I am drinking this evening a Sam Adams cream stout, which the label assures me is sweet and roasty, and I can confirm that it is in fact both sweet and roasty. Yeah, perfect thing for a warm summer night here in Oklahoma City. Yeah, this is so cynical. It's so sharp edged. It's so much more satirical. This is by some measure, by some quantifiable measure here, the most Mel Brooks kind of beat that we get in this entire story, I think. Inigo's sincerity there, his radiant sincerity, true love. You heard him? These aging prosthetics are actually not bad now that I look at them. I mean, they're not good, right? These are not modern aging prosthetics, but they're by the standards of the time. Yeah, okay, a little heavy-handed. We're looking a little like. This is I don't know. There are moments in any good commentary track, I suppose, when I just fall silent because I'm watching the movie again and I don't really want to talk over this performance, but it's just fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, very Mel Brooks to me, says Nikki. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Melissa's taking off. Thank you for joining us this evening, Melissa. We'll be posting thoughts on the Star Wars podcast that drops. I'm sure that you will. We have a lot to discuss in the frame of The Last Jedi. Yes. Vengeance is what drives Miracle Max here. So yeah, maybe that is a Slytherin trait. Interesting. Oh, the coating it in chocolate is so lovely. Yeah, again, I just don't want to talk over that because the delivery on you shouldn't go in swimming for at least an hour. Yeah, I got an hour. And that's a movie wrap on Billy Crystal and Carol Kane. Just lovely. A great, much needed injection of energy and levity, I suppose, in a movie that had started to slow down a little bit, that had really started to lose its propulsive qualities. That works very nicely. And now we're really cutting into the last movement of the story. We're perilously close to our dark moment, in fact, with 20 minutes of movie running time, including credits to go. This is going to move pretty swiftly. And one of the surprising things about this movie, for all that the prologue is incredibly deft and swift, the ending too cuts straight to the point. It wastes not a second. Pretty much from the to the pain speech all the way through. Gosh, yeah, we might even argue Inigo finding Rogan, right? Andre the Giant's hands are very large hands. From that point to the very end of the movie, we just move. Not a second is wasted. Again, very efficient storytelling. which was, of course, a greater pressure upon screenwriters in 1987 than it is today. The average length of movies has crept up from 90 minutes to 2 hours over the course of the last 10 or 15 years or so. But back in the day, it was believed that audiences just wouldn't sit around. And every minute that you went over 90 minutes would attract studio attention, would attract studio pressure. You would be urged to cut back and keep it, contained, keep it focused in a greater way. So the fact that this movie even runs an hour and 37 minutes is, not terribly significant. That's still well within the margin of error, but it is interesting. But yeah, there is a greater pressure applied to movies in that period, and in basically every pre-modern period, than there is today, when it feels sometimes as though we want to expand our films. We want to increase the running time of our films, not to the point of unwieldiness, but to the point of substance and gravitas, right? That head lol is another one of those physical movements that has just stuck with me in its finest detail. Tom asking, can we get back to most movies being 90 minutes? Geez. I'd love that. And Gildarts is pointing out Gone with the Wind is 4 hours. Yes, of course, there are always outliers. Yes, but the average has crept up markedly. I credit a large part of that to the structural transition from 3-act storytelling to 4-act storytelling. I think now we just structure movies differently, and compressing a 4-act story into an hour and a half can be demanding. The difference between a 3-act story and a 4-act story is that in a 3-act story, we generally have either an internal or external climax. Either the good guy overcomes his faults and saves the day, or he beats the bad guy and saves the day. In modern 4-act storytelling, we like to do both, and we like those two things to be thematically entwined. So the good guy will overcome his faults so that he can beat the bad guy and save the day, or he will beat the bad guy so that he can overcome his faults and save the day. We just like that 4-act structure for some reason in modern blockbuster storytelling. And of course, we can also observe the expansion of movie theater, of motion picture running times, I suppose. We can attribute that in part to the entire collapse of the mid-tier movie industry. It used to be that you could make a movie for $16 million and it would bring back $30 million, and it would be not a knockout success. Certainly wouldn't change your career, but it would be a good piece of business for Paramount and for MGM, the distributor. That is not the case today. Now we don't make, well, I guess we do make $16 million because $16 million isn't quite what it was. But it used to be the case that you could make a movie for $50 million, $20, $15 million, and $2 million. And that middle tier has now completely vanished because you just don't get the return on it. If you spend $250 million making an Infinity War, for example, you are guaranteed at that point a $1 billion return globally, probably $1.5 billion return globally on the relatively, by the standards of modern movie studios, relatively modest investment that you've put into it. Or you take a shot and you make a movie for $2, $3, $4, $5 million, and there's always the hope you will at least make your money back, because basically no movie nowadays fails to make its money back because it's such a conservative business. But if you make a movie for that little money, there's always the hope that you are going to have a huge hit and turn that into 200, 300, 400 million. So it is, of course, a business. And that mid-tier, this is also why we don't, with few exceptions, get romantic comedies anymore, because romantic comedies pretty routinely fall in that middle ground. Yeah. Nikki saying, imagine in 90 minutes Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Tom saying, I feel like Lord of the Rings was the start of movies being longer. We'd already started to creep up, but yeah, I mean, again, I would put the Lord of the Rings in the Gone with the Wind, Lawrence of Arabia kind of real outlier category. I don't think the Lord of the Rings was... Well, no, that's fair, actually. I don't think The Lord of the Rings was intended to change the face of cinema, but its success certainly changed the face of cinema, right? It opened up a whole new market for blockbuster movies of that sort, yeah. So, the assault on the castle, the Holocaust cloak, the wheelbarrow, the flames going up, and Andre the Giant, Fezzik, playing the part of the dread pirate Roberts as we move through the marriage ceremony. And I realize that I've spent the last 10 minutes talking about many things, but not so much the movie, yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah. Titanic, Matt pointing out that logically you would think that a shorter film could be shown more often, but I think Titanic sank. Hey, I see what you did there, Matt. Sank that preconception. Yeah, 3 hours and 15 minutes. Yeah, no, Titanic, absolutely a herald of the modern expansion of movies, yeah. And of course, this is true of movies that we love as well as movies that we don't necessarily love quite so much, because, of course, The Last Jedi is the longest Star Wars movie. Not by much, actually. There was a lot made of the fact that The Last Jedi is the longest Star Wars movie, but it's only barely the longest Star Wars movie. I think it is the longest after Attack of the Clones, which was previously the longest. I forget. I did look it up and work it all out, but yeah. I love that we go to all the trouble of introducing Humperdinck's Spy Master just so we can have that beat, just so we can have the, oh, you mean this gate key? It's so good. So we cut ahead, man and wife. We don't complete the ceremony. We don't observe the formality here. We don't, if you'll forgive me for really hammering this point home, we don't really tell the story of the wedding here. We don't do what we ought to do. We don't move through the beginning, middle, and end. We skip to the end, and we don't resolve the outstanding narrative point there. If you didn't say it, then you didn't do it. I'm actually dubious about how legally binding that would be in the modern world. Gosh, I'm thinking about this literally for the first time. At what point are you married? It would be when you sign the registry, right? Like, regardless of what you say during the actual ceremony, you're legally married when you sign the registry. And if you don't do that, then you're not, right? That would be it, right? Just realized that. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Anyway. Yeah. Tom's confirming Attack the Clones is the second longest. Yeah. Angela saying Attack the Clones felt so long. Oh my God. The romance plot. Yes. Yeah, as I've said before, I still have a soft spot for the 10 minutes that Natalie Portman's really, really good. Actually, that's not fair. I think Natalie Portman is better than she's often credited as being in the prequel trilogy. This Christopher Guest turn as Rogan turns around. Gorgeous. Then the horns come up. We give chase. That horrible synth horn sound that we get in this part of the soundtrack. Yeah. And comedy beat there between Wesley and Fezzik. Yeah. Still don't know quite what we're doing in this part of the movie, but we're getting there. We're getting there very close. Yeah, Natalie Portman is generally better than I think people realize that she is in the prequel trilogy, but Padme Amidala gets to be great in the last 15, 20 minutes of Attack of the Clones, I guess. But yeah, there's a lot of bad that you have to get through. Yeah. Good. Gildart's Windows observing that I am apparently Hayden Christensen because of how I hate sand. Not Hayden Christensen. I am Anakin Skywalker secretly. I just hate sand. It's so rough. And oh, you guys. Yeah, good. Oh, Tom saying, oh, it's the worst live action Star Wars movie. Yeah, no, agreed. Attack of the Clones, yeah, absolute dead last. But yeah, I enjoy Padme Amidala in the ripped white outfit, taking agency, kicking ass. Yeah, she's pretty good there, just for like a minute, just for like a second. Yeah. This is one of those odd points in the movie where the sets don't feel as large as they need to be, right? We're just redressing these hallways. It's yeah. I mean, obviously, we're very limited what we can do on a soundstage when we're doing a chase sequence through a castle, but yeah. And now Wesley has disappeared. So our heroes are separated once more, and that's it. That's it for Fezzik, basically. This is a wrap for him. He's going to show up in that very last beat right there at the end of the movie, but we don't ever really resolve his story. He doesn't really have a story, except that he wants to be friends, right? He wants to be friends with Inigo and with Wesley too, presumably, and with Lady. Hello, Lady. The throwing of the knife is shameful. And again, this is a trick that Rob Reiner uses all the time, but he uses it particularly powerfully in this film. You note the way that we're getting the rising strings again as we're chasing through the castle, and then when he throws the knife, we get the thwip sound of the knife hurtling through the air, and then the soundtrack drops out completely. There's no score here. It's just the dialogue and the echo of the room. It's just that ambient room tone quality of Christopher Guest's voice as he's delivering this awful, evil speech. Christopher Guest has never been more Tim Curry than he is in this movie. I think that would have been like some completely appropriate transplanted casting, even at this point in Tim Curry's career. But yeah, it's very powerful stuff. And that's it. Having been deprived of all other avenues, having been deprived of all hope, now she is despairing. If you've been following me in There and Back Again, now she is despairing and bereft of hope. Buttercup resolves to take her own life rather than be compromised by this vile man, this absolutely awful human being, right? And again, okay, we can talk about I understand that there's a shortage of perfect breasts in the world line is problematic. I understand that it is, but I also believe sincerely that Wesley is making a joke there, that it is self-aware in that moment, that he is not reducing Buttercup to her body, to her physicality, right? The tragedy of Buttercup's suicide would not be the ruination of a pair of perfect breasts. That is really gross. And I do agree. I concede that a superficial reading of that moment is problematic. But I also don't think for a moment that Wesley is being sincere. I think that he is making a very wry and understated joke here about, and a joke in fairly dubious taste. I would even go so far as to admit that, as a way of kind of deflating the expanded emotions in the room at the time. Again, sword thrusts, music stings, and Inigo now just looking wretched. And this is the moment when he enters his state, right? This is his trance state. Now he is driven by nothing but revenge. Now he's driven by nothing but principle. Now he is going to avenge his father. This is so fantastic. And the repetition of the repetition of his speech here is so extraordinarily powerful that I think you can definitely get the sense that Rogan is losing his mind here. There's a very large fireplace in the middle of that room that I don't think I've ever noticed before. Look at that thing. That thing is huge. This is another point, by the way, where if you contrast William Goldman's script for the Princess Bride movie with his original novel, you see him adapt with a razor blade, just cleaving out unnecessary dialogue. Because this dialogue is lifted almost verbatim from the book, except that in the book, again, it continues past the line. There it is. That concludes the scene. And that is absolutely the right way to end the scene. He edits it back in a really powerful way, exactly as he edits back Wesley climbing the cliffs of insanity earlier in the movie. Gosh, it feels like we have been here for 5 minutes and we are absolutely in the closing moment. We've got one big scene left, you guys, and that's it. And then we're going to be out of here. Yeah. Matt saying, anyone else pretty sure upon first viewing that Inigo was going to die immediately following the carrying out of his revenge? There was one thing. Yes, I would have expected that from Inigo at this point in the story. That is completely salvaged for me by Wesley's line, "You make a wonderful Dread Pirate Roberts," that we get right at the end. That is such a great gesture toward the mythic, gesture toward the story. Inigo's story now has ended, right? That is why it would be narratively appropriate for him to die. I can't talk over to the pain. Here we go. Of course, Wesley defeating Humperdinck, using his words. And this is the most powerful instance of storytelling in the entire movie, right? He manages to defeat Humperdinck effectively without lifting a finger, effectively without moving a muscle, because he basically can't at this point. But the battle is over long before Wesley gets to his feet. I killed you too quickly last time. Yeah. Yeah, Andy saying that to the pain explanation was always so good for me. Yeah, this is fantastic stuff. This displays such a mastery of what we value and what we hold to be important. Because, of course, this isn't just a horrifying outcome. This isn't just a horrifying threat. This is specifically a horrifying threat for Humperdinck. He wants the glory. He wants to be fated. Why does he want to go to Gildor? Well, A, because he's presumably going to make a lot of money because wars are good for business. And B, because he gets to be the hero. He gets to be the king that leads the army into a valiant and glorious battle for very good reasons, for a crystal clear casus belli, right? He gets to be the hero. And Wesley is denying him that. This is such a great performance. Miserable vomitous mass is also a phrase that I say very rarely, but which appears in my head, in my internal monologue, more often than you would think. It's a thoroughly unpleasant phrase, yeah. Wesley's outsmarting of Humperdinck, says Marshall, mirrors his outwitting of Vicini earlier, and Inigo's slaying of the Count clearly concludes the arc we started in the duel scene. So, and we get a continuation there as Marshall types the rest of his thought, I guess. Shouldn't Fezzik have gotten a similar parallel in the final act? Yeah. In the perfect version of The Princess Bride, yes. In the version of The Princess Bride that we get, we can't. Like, what is there for Fezzik to do? He doesn't have a story. There's nothing actually driving him forward. He was this great legendary thing. That's pretty much. He was unemployed in Greenland. Like, he doesn't have anything driving him forward through the action. If he had, I guess, to the extent that Fezzik has something driving him forward through the action, it is just that desire for community and for friendship, which he kind of gets when he rescues the horses and steals the horses to rescue his friends, I suppose. Ah, such a good line, alone with his cowardice. And there you'll see the promise of the grandfather being completely fulfilled. Humperdinck lives. Humperdinck makes it through the story just fine. Yeah. So yes, Marshall, all of that is to say, I do agree. Like, in the perfect version of The Princess Bride, Fezzik has a story and he arcs through it. And yes, he absolutely gets a reflective conclusion between Inigo and Wesley, right? He gets, like, to pay off that 3-beat in the first act. We have a similar 3-beat here in the third act in the castle. Yeah, you're right. But there's just not enough substance with Fezzik in this version of the story, I think, to do anything with that. This is another one of those moments that I could picture that shot perfectly, that descending dress as she comes down. And Robin Wright is not tiny, right? She's not statuesque by any means, but she's not tiny, and she looks just nothing in Andre the Giant's arms there. It's crazy. Now that it's over, I don't have a story anymore. I don't know what's driving me. A little smirk again from Wesley, the little from Inigo. And that's it. That's basically our story. We're going to conclude here with a return to the frame in a very powerful and emotionally effective way. You'll notice too, if you've read the original novel, that we kind of get a hybridized version of what Bill Goldman is framing as the best ending, the worst ending, and like the moderate ending, like the realistic, naturalistic ending that we get at the end of the novel. And William Goldman as scriptwriter and Rob Reiner as director here give us a similar take on that. But unlike the novel, it is not acerbic and it is not satirical. It is affectionate and it is genuine. It is emotionally authentic, right when we need the movie to be its most emotionally authentic. The novel of The Princess Bride ends on a deliberately, a purposefully sour note, right? It is about Bill Goldman's disconnection from humanity. It's about the lonely life of the screenwriter in LA in part, right? So it's kind of exhausting in that way. It exhausts your emotional capacity. Holding on him just while he checks his pockets, which, by the way, in the last year I have started doing when I leave the house. I never did that before. I always knew where my stuff was. And in the last year I've started doing that as I leave the house. This is what happens as you approach 40, you guys. Peter Falk with twinkly eyes saying, "As you wish, it turns out is pretty much everything I want from the world." He turns out the light and we transition into our closing credits. And that, you guys, is going to do it. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you all so much for joining me. I really enjoy doing these commentary tracks, these live discussions with you all. So if there's something that you'd like me to discuss, then by all means get in touch and let me know. As I say, we will be back with Story and Star Wars very soon. We will be back with a new Point North one-shot. Those of you who aren't patrons of Point North Media might not have heard the news that I am planning a one-shot discussion of Lin-Manuel Miranda's fantastic Hamilton. Hamilton from a narrative point of view. Let's strip out the music, let's strip out the performances, let's strip out the theatricality and the production aspect of it. Let's even try and strip out as much of Lin-Manuel Miranda's personal charisma as we can. We can't obviously do that completely, but we will do our best. And we're going to look at Hamilton as a story that is going to be probably week after next. And we'll go out in the regular one-shot feed. And obviously, of course, you can stay tuned to pointnorthmedia.com, where you can find the schedule and all the show notes for all the podcasts that I produce. This has been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to just relax here and watch the rest of these credits as we conclude. But I'm going to wrap up the live show now and see you all again very, very soon. Thank you for helping me test YouTube too. If you have any particular thoughts on the YouTube/Crowdcast issue, get in touch. Let me know. You can email pointnorthmedia@gmail.com. I'll talk to you all again very soon. Thank you for joining me this evening.